My name is Madison Blake. I'm 32, a UX designer living in Asheville, North Carolina, where the mornings are usually quiet and clear, and the air smells like mountain rain and roasted coffee. I've spent most of my adult life designing clean, intuitive systems, small things that help people feel seen without even realizing it. I used to think if I lived with that same quiet, precision life would return the favor. That belief ended the night of my engagement party. We chose a small restaurant tucked into the edge of downtown, a place Daniel and I had walked by dozens of times. Warm light spilled across the tables, and everything felt soft and close. The windows fogged from the outside chill. Candles burned in glass holders between small vases of blush roses. I had picked out the menu myself, seasonal, elegant, nothing extravagant. It felt honest. It felt like us. Daniel sat beside me, calm as always, his hand lightly wrapped around mine beneath the table. His parents were across from us, beaming with quiet pride. My father, Jim, gave a shy, small smile, swirling his water glass. And then there was my mother. Carla, perfect posture, perfect pearl's eyes, scanning the room like she was mentally reordering everything out of place. Beside her, my sister Reagan sat slouched phone in hand, barely pretending to be interested. It wasn't a large gathering. Some friends from my office, a few of Daniel's colleagues, and our closest family. I wanted it to feel personal, intimate, safe. After dessert, Daniel stood to give a toast. He lifted his glass and looked around the room with that steady presence he carries so effortlessly. To beginnings, he said, voice low but firm, and to building a love that doesn't need to be loud to be lasting. Polite applause followed. Someone murmured, perfectly said. I started to rise from my seat, prepared to thank everyone when I heard it, the unmistakable clink of metal against glass. Sharp, deliberate. My mother stood holding her champagne flute aloft like she was at a gala. Her eyes glittered, her lips stretched into a smile that didn't quite reach her voice. I'd like to add something she began. As Madison's mother, I've watched her grow into someone strong, capable, and steady. She's built a wonderful life for herself. I smiled, faintly unsure where this was going, but grateful for even that much. I'd waited years for a moment like this. She's always been generous, responsible, the kind of woman who thinks about others first. She paused. And since this is such a special moment, your father and I have decided that Madison's wedding fund, $40,000, will be redirected to Reagan so she can have the wedding she deserves too. Silence, dense and immediate. I stared at her, not fully processing. I thought I had misheard. I'm sorry, I said softly, not standing yet. The money, she repeated. We've decided to gift it to Reagan. Her situation is different. She's starting from a more difficult place. And you, well, you're established. Reagan looked up, then her face a mix of smug and defensive. She wasn't surprised. She knew. That money was in my account, I said, transferred to me when I was 18. I've saved it for over a decade. I planned with it. My mother tilted her head like I was being petty. You already have enough, Madison. You have a career, a fiancé, a life. Your sister deserves to feel supported too. I was never told this, I said. You always talk about family first, so we made a decision for the good of the family. I felt my face grow hot, but my voice stayed even. No, that money was entrusted to me. You don't get to reroute it like it's yours. Daniel began to stand, but I touched his arm. I needed to speak this myself. Reagan scoffed. You act like you're better than everyone. Maybe this is why nobody ever leans on you, because you make them feel small. I've never made anyone feel small, I said, turning toward her. I've just never asked anyone to carry my consequences for me. That was when my mother's face changed. Her expression hardened. Without a word, she stepped toward me and slapped me. The sound echoed, glasses clinked, chairs creaked. My cheek stung immediately, heat radiating across my face. I stumbled half a step back. No one moved. Reagan froze, wide-eyed. My dad looked down at the table mouth, thin and unmoving. The room, for a moment, felt like it had fallen into another time zone, stretched, silent, unreal. Then came a voice behind me, quiet but firm. Yes, I'd like to report an assault at Glasshouse Bistro. A woman just hit someone in the middle of an event. My mother's head whipped toward the bar. A waiter, young, nervous, maybe a college student, stood with a phone pressed to his ear. "I called," he said, "and I'll give a statement." Daniel wrapped his arm around my shoulders, but I didn't lean in. I stayed upright. Minutes later, blue and red lights flickered outside the windows. Two officers entered, calm and professional. "Miss Blake," one asked gently, "would you like to file a report?" I looked at my mother. She didn't look remorseful, she looked cornered, like a ruler caught cheating her own measurements. "Yes," I said, "I would." The officer nodded and turned. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." Carla didn't resist, but as she passed, she looked at me and said coldly, "You've just torn this family apart." But she was wrong. She didn't understand yet that the tearing happened long ago, that this night didn't fracture anything, it simply revealed the cracks that had always been there. After they left, the room exhaled slowly. A few people mumbled excuses. Some offered quiet support. Most looked at me like they didn't know what to say. I sat back down, my cheeks still burning, but it wasn't pain that shook me. It was the realization that something had shifted in me. Permanently. I reached into my bag and touched the linen envelope. Inside, it was the letter from the bank confirming the $40,000 transfer to my personal account years ago. Proof I never thought I'd need. Proof my mother already knew about. But tonight I didn't show it. I didn't defend myself. Tonight I let the silence speak for me. I grew up in Greensboro in a one-story brick house with blue shutters and a front porch that creaked when you stepped too hard on the second plank. From the outside, our house looked like the picture of balance. Inside, it was a place where balance only existed if you tilted yourself to keep others steady. I was always the responsible one. I didn't earn that title, I was assigned it. Even as a child, I was the one who kept track of permission slips and packed my own lunch when my mom forgot. I learned how to fold laundry by age 8, budget by 14. I liked order. I liked clarity. I liked knowing that if I put something in the right place, it would stay there. That belief held mostly until Reagan came along. Reagan was born 4 years after me, and from the start, everything in the house bent slightly toward her. Not because she demanded it, but because my parents made room for her by quietly pushing me aside. She was more sensitive, they said, more emotional. She needed support, she needed space, and I had always been so good at handling things on my own. My mother, Carla, was the type of woman who sent thank you notes for birthday gifts and corrected your grammar at the dinner table. She believed in preparation order and presentation, but she also believed that fairness was flexible. In our house, it bent toward whoever looked most fragile. Reagan didn't finish college. She went for 2 years to a design school in Atlanta, dropped out when a boyfriend broke up with her, and moved back home with a dream of starting a candle company. My parents cleared out the guest room so she could focus creatively. When the candle business flopped, she pivoted to handmade jewelry, then an online boutique, then personal styling. Each time my mom and dad helped her reset. A small loan here, a car repair there, rent for an apartment she swore would be temporary, and always the same justification: she's still figuring herself out. I never asked for help, so they never offered it. By my junior year of college, I was managing my own part-time job, scholarship paperwork, and class schedule without reminders. I lived in a dorm where the heater rattled and the window shades never quite closed. My meals came from the discount aisle and whatever I could stretch from leftovers. But I had a system, a ledger notebook I kept next to my bed where I logged every expense, every goal. That's where the wedding fund started, first as a joke, then as a quiet promise to myself. $25 here, a little more after a bonus tutoring shift. When my grandmother passed away, she left me a small inheritance, just under $8,000. I didn't touch it. I added it to the account I'd opened the day I turned 18, titled Simply Long Term. At the time, I didn't know if it would go to a HOMA degree, a trip I'd probably never take, but I knew it would be mine. Mine to protect, mine to decide. Eventually, it became the wedding fund, though I never mentioned that to anyone. The idea of a wedding, of being seen celebrated, had always felt like something other people got to experience. I'd been to plenty, sat through them with a tight smile and a gift bag carefully budgeted for. But when I met Daniel, that changed. Slowly, then all at once. He made the idea feel possible, real. My parents said they were happy for me when we got engaged. They sent flowers. Reagan didn't say much, just posted a photo of her dog that same day with a caption about lifelong companionship. I didn't push. The strange part is, I never resented them. Not really. I accepted early on that Reagan would always be the one people worried about, and I would be the one they leaned on when they got tired of worrying. One memory always sticks. I was 26, living in a small apartment in Chapel Hill, working full-time while taking night classes to finish my degree. I got a call from my mom. Reagan had overdrawn her account again and needed help with rent. They didn't ask me directly, but it was implied. So I drove down that weekend, brought a grocery bag of essentials, and left $200 in cash tucked inside a cookbook on her counter. She never mentioned it. Neither did I. That was the rhythm of our family: you give, you don't ask. You're reliable, so you're forgotten. There's a photo that used to hang in my parents' hallway, me and Reagan at ages 7 and 3 sitting on the front steps in matching dresses. I'm smiling, big, open, gap-toothed. Reagan is resting her head on my shoulder. Everyone used to comment how sweet we looked, how natural I seemed at taking care. But I remember that day. Reagan had thrown a tantrum because she didn't want to wear the dress. I had calmed her down. I'd told her we could go barefoot and hide our shoes behind the bush so Mom wouldn't yell. I made her laugh just in time for the photo, and so the record shows harmony. The reality was silence. Years later, when I moved out of that house for good, I found a letter I had written to my mom when I was 16. It was never sent. The paper was thin, creased 3 times over. In it, I tried to explain how it felt to never be the one asked how I was doing, to always be told I was fine without being asked. I didn't even remember writing it until I unfolded it in my college apartment, tears welling for a version of myself I'd almost forgotten. I never sent the letter. I folded it back up, tucked it into the back of a drawer, and told myself it didn't matter anymore. But it did. Of course it did. That's why, when my mother stood up at my engagement party and announced to a room full of people that the fund I'd protected for over a decade was no longer mine, something inside me split, but not from shock, from recognition. She'd done it quietly for years. The difference now was that everyone could see. That slap didn't break me. It revealed the blueprint I'd been living by my whole life. And finally, I saw it clearly enough to refuse it. Not with screaming, not with proof. Just with no. Filing the police report was not a dramatic moment. It was quiet, almost clinical. Camille Ford, the attorney Daniel connected me with, sat beside me at the small desk in the station. She didn't push. She didn't flinch when I hesitated. She just waited. "I don't want this to be about revenge," I said, signing my name at the bottom of the form. "It's not," she replied. "It's about drawing a line that should have been drawn years ago." The officer nodded politely. "We have security footage and 2 staff witnesses. It's a solid case." Even then, I didn't feel resolved. I felt hollow, as though the sound of that slap had emptied something out of me and left the echo behind. Carla was arrested, booked, and released. The papers said domestic dispute, and she didn't deny the event, but she did deny fault. When asked for comment, she told an officer she was protecting family balance, whatever that meant. I thought maybe foolishly that would be the end of it. I thought the humiliation might lead to reflection, maybe even apology. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the arrest, a package arrived at my apartment. I opened the door barefoot, coffee in hand. A courier handed me a sealed manila envelope. Inside was a civil suit my parents were suing me for the return of the $40,000 fund. They claimed the money had been misused, that it was intended exclusively for educational purposes, and had been redirected without mutual agreement. The language was cold, rehearsed, detached. At the top, Carla and Jim Blake, plaintiff. At the bottom, Madison Blake, defendant. For a moment, I just stood there in the kitchen envelope in one hand, mug in the other, staring at my name as if it didn't belong to me. When Camille arrived that evening, she sat at my dining table with her yellow legal pad pen, poised glasses perched on her nose like a lighthouse beam. "They're bluffing," she said. "It won't hold up. The fund was transferred to your personal account when you turned 18. We have copies of the original custodial agreement, the release terms, the correspondence. They have no legal grounds." "Then why do it?" She looked up. "Because some people would rather punish you through the process than admit they've lost control." That same night, I got a call from Rachel, a colleague from my first job out of college. She asked hesitantly if I was okay. I said I was. She paused, then added, "I only ask because, well, I heard from someone that your wedding was canceled." I froze. "What?" She cleared her throat. "I got an email from what looked like your address. Just a sentence saying the ceremony had been called off for personal reasons." I checked my email. No record of it in sent mail. No drafts. Nothing. Camille brought in a forensic consultant 2 days later who traced the message to an IP address in Charlotte. Reagan City. There was no direct proof, just circumstantial links, timing, location, behavior. But I didn't need a confession. I already knew. Then came the photos. Daniel received them first. An email with no subject line, just a series of attachments. The images showed me at least it looked like me sitting at a cafe across from a man I didn't recognize, our heads tilted together as if mid-laughter. Another image showed the man's hand on mine, but the skin tones didn't match. The light source didn't align. My facial expression looked cut and pasted, stiff and flat. Even the barista in the background looked doubled, like someone had dragged the image into place without checking for alignment. Daniel stared at the screen, then turned it toward me. I blinked. "They think I'd fall for this," he asked quietly. Tears welled up, not from fear, but from the weight of being believed. We didn't reply. We forwarded the email to Camille, who documented it immediately. A report was filed with the service provider. The digital trail led back again to Charlotte. That week, whispers reached extended family. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years texted me, unsure of what was true. An aunt sent a vague message that read, "Just praying for clarity for everyone," as if this had been some unfortunate misunderstanding instead of a targeted campaign. I stopped responding, stopped explaining. I began logging everything. Every email, every text, every passive-aggressive comment from a distant relative on social media. Camille built a timeline, from the initial threat at the engagement dinner to the fake email, the slander, the photos, the lawsuit. Each moment documented with dates, screenshots, witness statements, and receipts. The more evidence we gather, Camille said, the less room they'll have to distort the truth. I started keeping a folder by my desk, just a simple navy binder. Inside were copies of the custodial agreement email confirmations from the bank and the signed letter from the original fund manager acknowledging full control had passed to me when I turned 18. No conditions, no stipulations. There was a photo taped inside the front cover, Daniel and me standing in front of our apartment on the day we moved in. I'd taped it next to a printout of one of the faked photos, the contrast so striking I couldn't ignore it. One was real, warm, alive. The other was curated deception. I didn't share the binder. Not yet. It wasn't for public defense. It was for me. A reminder that when truth is real, it doesn't need to shout. Still, the hurt ran deeper than I admitted. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Because a part of me had always been waiting for the moment when love in my family stopped being a currency and became a contract. Reagan never called. She never apologized. She let the rumors circle like birds around roadkill, stepping back whenever the claws came close. That was when I stopped reacting. I stopped trying to win anyone back. Stopped hoping they'd correct the record or realize what they'd done. I stopped asking why. I stopped waiting for answers. Instead, I began preparing. For what I didn't fully know, court a statement, another smear. But preparation felt better than hope. I started sleeping better. Not because the noise stopped, but because I finally learned to stop listening. The weeks before our wedding didn't feel like countdown, they felt like containment. After the lawsuit, the rumors and the silence from people I once trusted, Daniel and I, decided to move forward quietly. No registries, no public posts, no dramatic updates. Just a simple garden ceremony and the people who still stood beside us. We met each night at the kitchen table with mugs of tea and a notebook. We chose a small venue just outside Asheville, a private property with tall hedges and soft wild grass. The owner, a retired florist, let us use her space for a fraction of what it was worth. It felt safe there, tucked away, real. We hired 2 private security guards, one for the entrance, one to walk the perimeter. It felt excessive at first. But after everything, I didn't feel paranoid. I felt prepared. Camille drafted the formal disinvitation notices. They weren't emotional, just a simple letter stating that for the well-being of the bride, Carla, Jim, and Reagan Blake were not permitted to attend the event. I signed each one in blue ink, my signature steady. I mailed them with no return address. A few days later, a florist canceled unexpectedly. Then a vendor claimed they'd received confusing messages. Small disruptions, harmless on the surface. I started checking every booking myself. One night around midnight, I nearly called it all off. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the guest list in front of me, holding a photo from our engagement shoot. I couldn't hear my own thoughts over the noise of what we'd endured. My chest felt heavy with a question I couldn't name. Daniel found me there still in my work clothes, hands folded. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat down beside me and said, "It's not about whether it's perfect. It's about whether it's still ours." That changed something. Not everything, but enough. 3 days before the wedding, I got a knock on my door just before noon. One of the security guards we'd hired, a man named Paul, stood there with a firm, calm expression. "We just stopped someone trying to enter from the service gate," he said. "Your sister." I froze. She climbed the fence on the north side and was moving through the back lot. Said she was here to fix something. Said she was invited. My stomach tightened. Is she okay?" "She's fine," he said. "We detained her before she made it past the hedges. She had a backpack. We checked inside." He handed me a list he'd written by hand. "When can black spray paint?" 3 uncapped perfume bottles. 1 pair crafting scissors. No phone, no ID. I stared at the list. Every item felt heavier than the last. "What did she say?" He hesitated. "She said she wanted to fix the decorations, something about the aisle not being ready. And she was holding a ribbon." I didn't ask to see her. I didn't ask for a confrontation. I just said, "Don't let her near the property again, and don't call the police unless she comes back." Paul nodded, understood. When he left, I stood at the kitchen window looking out at the street. The lavender I planted in the balcony pots last spring had just started to bloom again. Tiny, upright stalks. Nothing loud, just enough. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just stood there feeling the ache of what it means to have a sibling who doesn't see the damage they leave behind as damage at all. What struck me most wasn't the act, it was how casual it had all become, as if violating boundaries was still seen as love. That night, I opened my closet and touched the edge of my bridal veil. It hung on a hook near the window, catching the last bit of sun. I thought of all the years I had been told that strength meant endurance, that to be generous was to say yes, that saying no made you cold. But strength isn't swallowing what breaks you. It's knowing what to put down and never pick up again. The next morning, the house was quiet. Daniel had gone to pick up his suit and meet with the officiant. I was alone. No music, no phone, no distractions. I sat on the edge of the bed, one hand pressed to my chest, feeling the rhythm of my own breathing. Not shallow, not fast, just steady. I looked around the room, the dress hanging near the window, the folded linen napkins stacked neatly in a bag, the printed seating chart tucked inside a folder, all of it small, all of it mine. I thought of Reagan again, not with hate, not even with sadness, but with a kind of clear finality. I remembered her standing next to me as kids, eyes wide, always asking me to cover for her, take the blame, quiet the noise, absorb what she couldn't carry. For a long time, I had done that willingly. I had believed love meant shielding others from consequence. But that's not love. That's captivity. What Reagan had tried to sabotage wasn't the wedding. It was my right to exist outside of her shadow. I stood up and walked to the window, resting a hand against the frame. Outside, the wind lifted the edges of the trees. The garden was quiet, waiting, and for the first time in a long time, so was I. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. Not because the chaos was over, but because it no longer reached me. Tomorrow I would walk down the aisle, not to prove anything, not to win. Just to begin. The morning after our wedding, the world was quiet. There were no headlines, no big announcements, No viral photos or dramatic reunions. Just the soft shuffle of coffee being brewed and Daniel humming to himself in the kitchen of our rental cabin somewhere between joy and peace. For a few days, we let the world shrink to the size of a lakefront porch and a shared blanket. But quiet doesn't last forever, not when someone's committed to turning your silence into a blank page for their own story. By the end of the week, the calls started coming, not from the people who came to the wedding, but from the ones who didn't, from second cousins, from former coworkers, from friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were gentle, "I heard you've been going through something." Others were blunt. "Is it true you were disowned?" One message simply read, "You've changed." I didn't need to guess where it was coming from. My mother was on the phone with anyone who would pick up. Reagan, I later found out, had posted vague poetic captions on social media. Some things break before they heal, and what's lost is meant to be replaced with a close-up of a torn bridesmaid dress that had never been assigned to her. One rumor said I canceled the wedding out of guilt. Another claimed Daniel's family had stepped in because I'd become unstable. Someone even suggested I was in therapy for emotional control issues. Not one of them mentioned the lawsuit. Not one of them mentioned the slap. They were rewriting the story without me. I didn't respond. I didn't correct them. Instead, I sent Camille everything I had again. Not because I doubted her, but because I needed to remind myself I wasn't losing my grip. The truth was still in my hands. It had just become harder to hold when everyone else kept telling me to drop it. Camille called 2 days later. "I've found it," she said, "the original custodial agreement." Her voice was calm, almost flat. She knew the power wasn't in the drama, it was in the clarity. She emailed me the scanned document. I opened it slowly, sitting cross-legged on the floor in our living room, the evening light cutting clean lines across the rug. There it was, a typed and signed agreement from Premier Equity Bank, dated June 15th, the year I turned 17. The language was simple. The account, funded by my parents with early college savings and a small inheritance from my grandmother, would be released in full to my control upon my 18th birthday. No educational stipulation, no repayment clause, no wedding disapproval provision tucked in the margins. Camille highlighted the relevant lines in yellow. This wasn't a loan, she said. It wasn't conditional. It was a custodial account that passed into your full legal ownership. Period. She also forwarded archived emails from the bank confirming the release of funds and a notarized bank officer's letter verifying the transfer. "You owe them nothing," she said, "and now we can prove it." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled deeply. It wasn't about winning. It was about the weight in my chest finally shifting. I kept a printed copy in my desk. Tucked beside it, I placed the unopened letter my mother had once sent me after my college graduation. I'd never opened it. I still haven't. It felt symbolic now, everything she thought I needed to hear, always too late and always on her terms. On a quiet Sunday morning, I printed one more copy of the agreement and placed it in an envelope. I addressed it to Aunt Elaine. She was my mother's older sister, always polite, always distant. She hadn't chosen sides, hadn't shown up to the wedding, hadn't asked why. But I remembered her slipping me extra cookies at Christmas as a kid. I remembered that she once offered to teach me how to knit when my mother said I was too busy. I didn't send the envelope to accuse or convince. I sent it so someone would see the truth and hold it without twisting it. 3 days passed. Then the phone rang. It was Elaine. Her voice was soft, measured. Madison. I stood still in the kitchen. "Hi." I read everything she said. I'm sorry I stayed quiet. I didn't say anything. She went on. "I believe you, and others will too." She didn't promise to call anyone. She didn't say she'd speak to my mother or change anyone's mind. She didn't need to. She'd seen what they tried to erase. And she didn't look away. After we hung up, I stood by the window, the phone still warm in my hand. Outside, the sun was beginning to set the light pooling over the rooftops like it had nowhere else to be. I could have posted the documents online. I could have sent a mass email with attachments and subject lines like the truth. I could have shouted it into every void they tried to trap me in. But I didn't. Because the truth doesn't need applause. It just needs space. I went to the kitchen table and placed the final printed copy of the custodial agreement inside a navy folder. I clipped it shut, not with defiance, but with quiet finality. There it was proof that I was never the thief they made me out to be. Proof that being the daughter who plans, who saves, who resists chaos with calm, that didn't make me less worthy of respect. It just made me easier to exploit. Until I said no. And now I don't need to explain that no to anyone. Not anymore. The morning of our wedding arrives quietly, like someone gently opening a door. Sunlight pours through the gauzy curtains of the bridal suite. It smells faintly of lavender and pine, the scent from the handmade bundles tied to every napkin. I sit alone by the window veil, folded neatly on the chair beside me, and watch a pair of birds dart between the treetops just beyond the hedges. I feel calm. Not numb, not euphoric, just whole. The drama is behind us. No new messages, no unexpected visitors. Everything that matters is in front of me now. Uncle Rick arrives to walk me down the aisle. He doesn't say much, just offers me his arm and a warm look. I never had a daughter, he says, patting my hand once. But if I had, I'd hope she turned out like you. The air shifts in my chest like something small but heavy has been released. The ceremony takes place in the heart of a private garden just outside Asheville. It isn't extravagant, but it's exactly what we wanted. Wooden chairs face a natural arch wrapped in vines. The breeze tugs gently at the linen ribbons knotted along the aisle. The guitarist strums softly beneath a canopy of dogwood trees, and the scent of rosemary and sweetgrass drifts in from the garden edge. The aisle is short, but each step feels like a quiet reclamation. As Rick and I walk, I glance at the faces turned toward us, not just present, but present for the right reasons. Camille sits near the front, her hands folded in her lap. My childhood friend Elise gives a small wave, eyes shining. Daniel's parents are here, both in navy beaming. Rachel from work, Ben and Maya from Daniel's firm. My cousin Melissa, who cut ties with the rest of the family last year and sent a letter that simply read, "Some stories need different endings." There's a single empty chair near the back, meant for no one, but also everyone who chose absence. Reagan isn't here. My parents aren't here. The silence of their absence doesn't ache anymore. It just exists, like wind through grass felt, but no longer feared. When Daniel sees me, he smiles in that quiet way he does when something matters. He looks nervous, but not uncertain. Like me, he knows we've already done the hardest parts. This ceremony is not our test, it's our affirmation. We exchange our vows without a microphone, just voice to voice. His words are steady, a promise to honor the small things, the way I leave a light on, even in summer, how I collect old books and never read them all, how I fight quietly but fiercely for what I believe. My vows are simpler than I expected. I tell him that love for me has always meant work, effort, structure. But with him, it became something else, still steady, still intentional, but also light, also free. We exchange rings. The wind catches my veil. Someone laughs softly. And just like that, we are married. After the ceremony, we don't rush into posed photos or toasts. We linger. Guests sip lemonade from cut glass tumblers. People sit in clusters under the trees, talking in low, contented voices. There is no drama. There is no spotlight. There is only peace. Uncle Rick finds me after the first round of photographs. He hands me a small wooden box carved with soft edges and a polished surface. The lid is etched with careful script. Family isn't who you're born to, it's who shows up. Inside the box is our marriage license, printed and folded carefully. Beneath it, a photo me, Daniel, and Rick, standing beneath the floral arch framed by light. I blink, surprised. You already had this printed? He shrugs, but his voice is thick. Melissa took it on her phone and sent it to the printer down the road. Thought you should have something real to hold on to. I don't speak. I just close the lid slowly and hold the box against my chest for a long moment. Later during the meal, people take turns standing up to speak. There are no rehearsed speeches, just stories, gratitude, laughter that doesn't try to overshadow anything. Rachel says I used to think Madison was quiet because she didn't have anything to say. But the truth is, she just never wasted her words. Camille adds, She may be the calmest client I've ever had, but that's what made her unshakable. Still waters don't just run deep, they run true. Daniel's mother tells me that she used to worry no one would ever understand her son the way she did. Then she saw the way I handed him a cup of tea when he was anxious and didn't speak, just waited. That's not carelessness, she says. That's care. I don't think about the people who aren't here. I don't think about the vacant chair. Because when you've spent most of your life begging for crumbs from a table that keeps shifting out of reach, it takes time to recognize the full meal sitting in front of you. This isn't a fairy tale ending. There are no surprise reconciliations, no long-lost apologies waiting in the wings. But this moment, this circle of faces, this quiet garden, this light resting on our shoulders like a blessing no one needed to announce is better. Better because it's real. Better because no one here demanded my silence in exchange for their presence. As the night stretches on, Daniel and I slip away from the small group standing at the edge of the garden, watching fireflies blink lazily over the hedges. He squeezes my hand and asks, "You okay?" I nod, better than okay. I look back at the wooden box Rick gave me now, resting safely in a basket near the table with our cards. I don't need to open it again to remember what's inside. Because I know now that legacy isn't built through inheritance. It's built through witness. And the ones who showed up for me, not out of duty but choice, are the ones who will carry that truth forward. Our new place sits on a quiet street in Forest Hill, tucked between a stretch of maples and a red brick library that smells like dust and old paperbacks. It's small, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs and a pair of lavender pots, but it belongs to us. That makes all the difference. The down payment came from what was left of the wedding fund. Not much after everything. But enough. Enough to start a life that felt real and chosen, not inherited or imposed. Daniel and I move in on a Tuesday. We don't hire movers, just 2 borrowed SUVs, a handful of friends, and a lot of laughter over crooked picture frames and forgotten boxes labeled important that turn out to be filled with bubble wrap and mismatched socks. By Saturday, we've unpacked enough to breathe. The bedroom smells like paint and fresh sheets. The windows are still bare. The coffee table is missing a leg, but we've wedged a folded towel under it until we can fix it properly. There's no rush. That's the gift this place gives us, room to go slowly. We hang Daniel's vows above our bed, framed in a piece of oak we sanded ourselves in the garage. His handwriting isn't perfect, but every word feels etched into the wall. Not because I must, but because I choose, it says about halfway down the page. I read that line almost daily now. We argue gently over where the couch should go. I want it centered beneath the window. He wants it angled toward the bookshelf. Eventually, we settle on a compromise, a soft curve that touches both. Later, we laugh about how the space feels better because of it. That night, we make dinner together. Nothing fancy, just pasta with garlic and roasted vegetables. I save the receipt from our first grocery run as a married couple and tuck it into a drawer in the kitchen. It feels silly and sweet and entirely ours. I water the lavender on the balcony each morning before I open my laptop. The scent is subtle but steady, like a quiet note played beneath everything else. I watch it grow in slow inches like it knows this time there's no hurry. Sometimes I wake early, not because I'm restless, but because I want to feel the stillness of our home before the day begins. I walk barefoot to the kitchen, start a pot of tea, and let the quiet speak. For so long, I thought of the $40,000 as a lifeline, a safeguard, a chance to plan a future I couldn't otherwise afford. I tracked it carefully, protected it like it was my spine. But now I understand that it wasn't the money that mattered, it was what I chose to do with it. How I used it not just to fund a wedding, but to draw a line. To say this is mine, this is sacred, this is the shape of my boundary. That clarity became the inheritance, not something passed down, but something I built from everything I refused to carry forward. I think about what might have been if I had stayed quiet at the engagement party. If I had handed over that money, apologized for flinching, accepted the shame as if I had earned it, maybe the wedding still would have happened. Maybe the family would have stayed intact on paper. But I would have disappeared in the process. shrunk myself to fit back inside the version of daughterhood they approved of silent, yielding, invisible. And I've worked too hard to be invisible again. One afternoon, Daniel brings home a wooden shelf kit from a secondhand shop. We build it together on the living room floor, laughing as we misalign the pegs and readjusted the supports. When it finally stands upright, slightly tilted but sturdy, he steps back and says, "It's not perfect, but it's ours." And I realize with quiet certainty that's what I needed all along. Not perfection, not approval, just something honest, something chosen, something built with both hands. We fill the shelf with Paperback's thrifted pottery and a glass jar of dried rose petals from my bouquet. I don't label it healing or closure or anything lofty. It's just what it is. A memory, a moment, a part of this home. That evening, the sun pours through the western windows and turns the walls gold. I sit at the table watching dust rise and settle in the light. I hold my tea with both hands, the warmth a quiet pulse in my palms. I no longer check my phone for messages from people who never asked how I was doing. I don't search for updates, don't scroll through Reagan's cryptic posts, or listen for what my mother might have said at church. They may still be rewriting the story. They may still be passing around a version where I am the selfish one. Let them. I know the truth. I live in it now. The truth is lavender and wooden pegs and vows in a frame. The truth is in the rhythm of my breath as I wake without dread. It's in the way Daniel pours coffee before I even ask. In the way I no longer brace myself for love that only comes with conditions. Inheritance isn't what you're given, it's what you choose not to pass on. I didn't get a family heirloom. I didn't get a legacy estate or pearls wrapped in velvet. I got distance. I got silence. I got a choice. And from that I shaped peace. As the sun slips behind the rooftops, I carry my tea to the window. I set it down gently on the sill and let the light move through it. Amber, soft, clear. For the first time in years, I feel still. Not because I stopped fighting, but because I no longer have to. It's a Sunday morning in late spring, and I'm walking through the Forest Hill Farmers Market with my canvas bag swinging gently at my side. The air smells like ripe peaches and fresh bread, and there's a quiet hum of conversation around me. Children run past my knees. Someone plays a violin beneath the shade of an oak tree. There's a woman selling bundles of lavender near the far end, her stand tucked beside a honey vendor. Each bundle is tied in twine and wrapped in brown paper. A handwritten sign leans against the wooden crate that holds them. It reads, "Love is freedom, not a leash." I stop, reread it, and smile. Not because it's clever, but because it feels like something I've known for a long time, but only now have the language for. I buy one bundle and carry it in the crook of my arm as I make my way home. The walk takes about 15 minutes past a schoolyard, a bakery, and a small park where I sometimes sit on the swings when no one else is around. I used to fill walks like this with phone calls, checking in on people returning voicemails, apologizing for not replying sooner. Now I walk in silence, and I like the quiet. Back at home, I set the lavender down on the kitchen counter and fill a small glass jar with water. It isn't fancy, just a repurposed jam jar, but it holds what it needs to. The house smells like jasmine and warm wood. Daniel's gone out to run errands, and I have the whole place to myself. I pour a cup of tea and sit by the window, the light falling soft and golden across the floor. I haven't blocked my parents' numbers. I haven't moved to another city. I haven't changed my name or erased them from my memory. But I haven't opened the door either. There have been no apologies, no letters, just a silence that hums like a fridge in another room, constant quiet and unacknowledged. Sometimes I wonder what they say now, if the story's changed again, if I've become the estranged daughter or the one who walked away from her family without cause. Maybe I'm the cold one. Maybe I'm the success story they mention vaguely, glossing over the details. But those aren't my questions anymore. Now the only thing I ask myself is whether I'm at peace, and the answer is yes. I don't need them to understand me to feel understood. I don't need them to invite me back in. I don't need them to admit anything out loud. The absence no longer feels like a wound. It feels like a boundary. That's something I never thought I'd learn. Growing up, I believed that closeness meant survival, that if you loved someone, you stayed near even when it hurt. that family came before discomfort, before conflict, before self. But I've come to understand that you can love someone and still close the door. You can forgive them and still choose not to return to the space where the harm happened. Forgiveness for me isn't a staircase back into their lives. It's the ground beneath my feet, the solid place I walk forward from. Sometimes I remember small things. A Christmas morning when Reagan opened 3 gifts before I'd unwrapped one, and my mother told me to stop making it about myself. A college graduation where I scanned the crowd for their faces and only found a voicemail waiting after. A time I sent my mom a letter never answered and realized I'd written more words to her than she had ever said to me that weren't requests or corrections. I used to replay those memories like scenes from a play, wondering where I should have spoken louder or swallowed more. Now I let them be what they are. A different house I used to live in, one I no longer return to. Daniel never asks about them unless I bring it up. He's learned when I want to talk and when I just want company. He keeps his arm draped gently behind me on the couch when old feelings rise. He doesn't fix them. He doesn't try to name them. He just stays. That's the kind of family I have now, the kind that shows up and stays. There's a framed photo on the windowsill, me, Daniel, and Uncle Rick standing beneath the wedding arch. Light cuts across our shoulders, and all 3 of us are laughing. It's not posed. We didn't know it was being taken. That's why I love it. Because it was real. Because none of us were trying to perform closeness. We were living it. Sometimes, when I dust the shelves, I glance at that photo and feel something steady in my chest. Not joy, not sorrow, just rootedness. I think that's what peace feels like. Later, as the afternoon fades into early evening, I take the lavender jar to the windowsill and set it next to my tea. The scent rises gently, not overpowering, just present. I remember my mother once telling me that lavender was too subtle to be worth planting. I understand now why it didn't suit her. I stare out the window for a long time, watching as the light shifts and softens across the street. A neighbor waters her plants. Someone walks their dog. The world moves forward with or without my old narratives. And I'm not waiting anymore. Not waiting for a call, not waiting for acknowledgement, not waiting for love to come in the form I begged for as a girl. If they ever do change, if their love becomes something with room for my boundaries, for truth, for silence that doesn't punish it, won't need a grand moment. They'll know where to find me. The door isn't locked, but I'm not standing by it anymore. I lift my tea, feel the warmth settle into my hands, and look out at the sky, pale blue and endless. This is what it means to be home. Madison's journey reminds us that self-worth is not given, it is claimed. She was the daughter who stayed quiet, the woman who planned ahead, the one who never asked for more. But when her love and labor were treated as obligation, she chose peace over approval. Through betrayal, legal battles, and silence from those who should have stood by her, Madison built something stronger than acceptance. She built clarity. Her story shows that sometimes the boldest act is not fighting back, but stepping away with quiet conviction. It is proof that true family is not always found in bloodlines, but in the ones who choose to show up. If this story spoke to you, or if you've ever walked your own quiet path toward freedom, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories about resilience, healing, and the strength it takes to choose yourself.